My mill burst into my hospital room just a couple of hours after my emergency C-section, looked at my tiny premature son, and announced to the entire floor, "Well, if you had not been so focused on your career, perhaps you wouldn't have failed at carrying a healthy baby to term." At that moment I realized this was no longer just about me. This was to protect my son. I'm Ashley, I'm 29 years old, and the happiest time of my life turned into a battlefield I never asked to be on. When I first met Kevin, 31, 7 years ago, I didn't realize I wasn't just falling in love with him, I was signing up to a war with his mother Patricia, 56. It had all the warning signs from the first day, but I was too much in love and too gentle to realize what was coming. The first time I met Kevin's family is as clear as day. I was so stressed, I took hours trying to choose the right outfit, not too casual, not too smart. I had even brought homemade pie, because my mom always said to never arrive empty-handed. Kevin's dad Mark was super friendly, and he immediately gave me this big bear hug. His sister Amber smiled and said she was pleased Kevin finally found someone with a brain. But Patricia? She just looked me up and down, gave some weird tight smile that didn't even go up to her eyes, and disappeared into an office there. At dinner they asked me what I did for a living. I worked for Somerset Elementary as a third-grade teacher. Mark and Amber appeared impressed, asking what it was like to work with kids. Patricia just kind of furrowed her brow and mumbled about how teaching isn't a real career, and how a woman's place is in building a family. I laughed it off, assuming she was kidding. She wasn't. Later that night, his dad called Kevin and said Patricia wanted him to break things off with me because I wasn't wife material. A woman with a career could not possibly be a good homemaker. Kevin was pissed and told his father to tell his mother to back off. I should have left right there, but Kevin's defense of me felt like such a green flag that I decided to ignore the enormous red one his mother was waving. The thing is, Kevin is the sweetest guy I ever met. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue and I spilled lemonade all over his white shirt. Instead of feeling annoyed, he just laughed and reassured me with saying, "Now we're both sticky and awkward." That's who he is, a good person, an empathetic person, always thinking of others. He is a high school history teacher and baseball coach. His students adore him. He's the kind of teacher who stays late to work with struggling kids, who knows every student's birthday, who makes history fun, really fun. I fell for him so hard, so fast, it was kinda embarrassing, lol. Things got more serious between us and Patricia got worse. Whenever Kevin wasn't there, she'd make these little comments that I was too invested in my little job to be a good wife. What do I seem too unfeminine to have kids, that I didn't look like the kind of girl her son should bring home. I initially thought perhaps I was being sensitive, but when the comments just kept coming, I understood she really didn't like me. She'd say things like, "It's so nice that you have a hobby like teaching to occupy your time until you have real responsibilities." Like what? Teaching 28 8-year-olds isn't a real responsibility. I was doing everything to get her to like me. Gave her flowers on Mother's Day. Asked for her recipes. Complimented her home. Sent thank you cards. Heard her stories about Kevin growing up. Nothing worked. She would take my gifts with that pinched smile and then deliver some backhanded comment like, "I'm so surprised you had time to shop with your busy career." It was exhausting. There was this really disastrous dinner at their house where Patricia went on this rant about how she really missed traditional family values when women knew their place. Kevin fired back that the world didn't operate that way anymore, and he was fortunate to have a partner who had a good job and shared the responsibilities. Patricia stared at me as if I'd sullied her golden sun. Kevin's father attempted to change the subject, but Patricia wouldn't stop. I was so uncomfortable I told Kevin I wanted to leave. On the drive home, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I could feel the anger, and I hate crying when I get angry. The following day, Mark contacted Kevin to explain the sting of Patricia's comments. He said she was just from a different generation and that she would come around eventually. Kevin was blunt with his dad and told him if his mom couldn't respect me, then she's disrespecting him too, and he wasn't going to put up with it. And so it initiated 3 weeks of Patricia calling Kevin and crying about how he was choosing me over his own mother. It was just so manipulative and gross. But Kevin held his ground, and I loved him even more for that. Then Patricia sorta laid low for a while. She'd still drop her little comments, but it was less frequent, less caustic. When Kevin proposed a year later, I was overjoyed, but immediately dreaded having to deal with Patricia during the wedding planning process. Sure enough, Patricia was the type to react like someone had died when we told her we were engaged. She actually sighed and said, "Well, I guess this was meant to be." Who says that to an announcement of their son's engagement? She was even more upset when we said we wanted an intimate wedding. We were saving for a house, and there's a lot of us in my family. I have 4 siblings, so we really had to limit the guest list. Patricia wanted to invite all these random people she hasn't seen in years. When Kevin inquired whether she would be paying for their plates if we did agree to invite them, she was so offended. She's like, "As your parents, we shouldn't have to pay to bring guests to our son's wedding." They hadn't contributed anything to the costs of the wedding either, I should note. Kevin and I were footing all the bills ourselves. Her wedding planning was a nightmare. She hated the venue, too modern. She hated the menu, too fancy. She hated my dress, too revealing, although it was super modest. She even attempted to change our color scheme. I wanted sage green and dusty rose, but she was sending me links for navy blue and burgundy stuff saying it was more appropriate. For what? It's our wedding. I was ready to cancel the whole thing, like 3 times. Not the marriage, only the ceremony. I wanted to elope so badly. My mom talked me out of it, though. She told us to not let Patricia steal our special day from us. My mom's the best, BTW. Total opposite of Patricia. She's this wonderful, humorous, kindy teacher who bakes when she's stressed and gives the absolute best advice. She kept me sane throughout all of this. On the wedding day as well, Patricia was complaining about everything: the venue, the food, my dress. Amber ran interference the whole night, pulling her from me so that I could actually have a nice wedding day. Amber is great. She's like this fiery, take-no-crap graphic designer who talks back to her mom about her shit. We weren't super close before the wedding, but once I saw how she had my back that day, I knew she'd be a great sister-in-law. Things went okay for some time after the wedding. We got our first apartment together, this little 1-bedroom that had almost no kitchen counter space, but it was OU-res. We were so happy. Patricia constantly put the call into Kevin, wanting to know when they were coming to visit, why he hadn't called, etc. But she mostly ignored me, which suited me just fine. The real nightmare began last April when we learned I was pregnant. We weren't expecting it, but we were happy to see it. We were nearly 2 years in, living in a small house with a real yard, each with a stable job. It felt like the right time. We waited until I was nearly 9 weeks pregnant to tell our families, because I'd had a chemical pregnancy the previous year, and we wanted to make sure. We told my family first at Sunday dinner, a separate complaint of Patricia's, that we spent more time with my family. Well, they're people nice to us. Then we drove to Kevin's parents' house to tell them. His father was truly elated, embraced both of us with tears in his eyes. Patricia, not so much. She gave that false smile and said, "Well, I guess I was wondering when you'd finally start a family." As if we hadn't been a family all along? Then she asked if I'd be quitting my job, and when I said no, she just pursed her lips and said nothing. The following day, I got a call from Patricia screaming about how SHE should have been the first to know. I told her it was better to wait until the news wasn't going to send everything in a tailspin, and that if she had a problem, she could take it up with Kevin because I didn't want her lectures on my mind at the moment. So not the right thing to say to her, but my hormones were raging all over the place, and I had just had enough of her shaming. She hung up on me, and then called Kevin at work to complain to him about me. He told her she was being ridiculous, and that he'd decide with his wife when and how to share our news. A month later, Amber told us she too was pregnant. We were so excited. Our children would be cousins just a few weeks apart. Patricia was frustrated at first because Amber was not married yet, despite being with boyfriend Jake for 4 years. She even had the audacity to ask Amber if she was sure she wanted to go through with it. Amber hung up the phone and, if the woman made another suggestion like that, said she'd never again see her grandchild. That shut Patricia up quick. Although Patricia was initially upset about Amber's pregnancy outside of marriage, her attitude completely changed when she realized she could use it as another way to criticize me. She began comparing our pregnancies as if it were a competition. For every symptom I experienced, she'd say things like, "Amber never has morning sickness. I guess she's just better equipped for pregnancy than you." If I complained of fatigue, she'd say, "Amber is still working full-time and preparing the nursery." I suppose some women just excel at motherhood. It was so hurtful, mainly because I was having a hard pregnancy. I was miserable and struggled with awful morning sickness for the first 4 months, and then gestational diabetes. Amber had an almost textbook pregnancy, which I was really happy for her about. But Patricia acted like I was failing some kind of pregnancy test. Amber hated this as much as I did. She would call me after talking to her mom, apologizing for things Patricia would say. We began hanging out more, shopping for baby things and trading nursery help. It was good to have someone who was in the same boat. We grew really close, which made Patricia even more jealous. I initially didn't want to have a gender reveal party, but everyone, including Kevin's family and some of my friends, kept insisting we should have one. Since I finally agreed to it, I wanted to at least organize it my way, so I asked Amber to find the gender out herself and just get the envelope ready so we could all be surprised. Patricia freaked the fuck out when she learned of this arrangement. She came to our house screaming that I was trying to cut her out of her grandchild's life because I wouldn't let her plan the gender reveal. Kevin told her to leave or he'd bar her from ever seeing our son again. She made a big fuss, crying and saying that all she wanted was what was best for her grandchild. But she left. That night, I broke down. I was pregnant 5 months, struggling with GED, trying to get my classroom ready for my impending maternity leave plus now this. I just sat on Kevin's lap and cried, asking why his mom hated me so much. Kevin held me and said we'd figure it out, that he wouldn't let her stress me out anymore. My pregnancy became even more stressful after that. Patricia kept offering advice that came across as criticism. When Christmas rolled around, Kevin told her we wouldn't be visiting their house because I was too pregnant, 7 months, to travel that far. Family tradition, she said, seething, for the 100th time, that we had to come. When Kevin refused, she accused me of alienating him from his family. She guilt-tripped him, saying that this might be his dad's last Christmas. Mark's perfectly healthy, by the way, and that I was selfish. Kevin had enough and cut off her number for 2 weeks. It was the quietest Christmas we'd had since we met. From January on, my blood pressure started rising. My doctor was worried and ordered modified bed rest. Somehow Patricia found out, maybe through Mark, and had the nerve to call Kevin and say that I was probably just exaggerating for attention. Kevin lost it. He said to her that the day if anything ever happened to me or the baby due to her constantly putting stress and drama in our lives, he would never be able to forgive her. She played the victim, sobbing about how he was holding me responsible for all his health issues. I went into early labor at 33 weeks. We moved so quickly that we weren't able even to call anyone until after our son Lucas was born by emergency C-section. He was wee but well, thank the Lord. Once we knew Lucas was stable, Kevin posted in the family group chat, and while everyone else was sending congratulations, Patricia sent a series of angry texts saying she wasn't told I was in labor and how she should have been in the delivery room. As if I would ever want her there? I was still recovering, tired, emotional, and working out the whole breastfeeding thing when Patricia came to the conclusion that my medical emergency was somehow a personal attack on her. I handed Kevin my phone and told him to talk to his mom because I couldn't deal with her at that moment. He shut off my phone and took care of everything so I could concentrate on Lucas. So when Patricia finally met Lucas a week later, she struggled to call him William, the name she'd chosen. When we corrected her, she said it was some sort of special name from Grandma. Kevin quickly shut that one down and added, "His name is Lucas. That's what you'll call him." She pouted, like a girl told no candy before dinner. Then she would give out about my breastfeeding, too, because he couldn't go and feed him and bond with him. My mom, who was staying with us to help out, attempted to explain how beneficial breast milk is for newborns, but Patricia wasn't hearing it. She kept making comments like, "Formula babies are just as smart," and "I formula-fed both of my kids, and they turned out fine." No one was arguing with her. All I had wanted was to feed MY baby how I wanted. Lucas was colicky for his first 2 months, which led to many sleepless nights and fraught days. Patricia called almost every day to ask if we were doing it right and implying that we were somehow causing his colic. She'd say things like, "Amber's baby never cries like that, and maybe if you'd stop breastfeeding, he'd settle down." I was an emotional wreck already from hormones, recovery, and sleep deprivation. She constantly made me doubt myself, like I was a bad mother. My final straw was when Patricia asked me to lunch, saying she needed to talk about something important. After canceling a bunch, newborn, I finally agreed. When I arrived, she asked who Lucas's godparents will be. I said that Amber and I had made each other the godparents of our children. Patricia started crying in the middle of the restaurant and yelled that I was intentionally leaving her out of this and that she should be the godmother of Lucas because she had every right to care for him if anything happened to us. I reminded her she had spent my entire pregnancy getting me to compare myself unfavorably to Amber, so she should be grateful that Lucas had such capable hands to fall into. She kept insisting no one could be trusted except her, and I finally told her this conversation was done. I called Kevin from the parking lot, quaking with rage and humiliation. He was livid. He called his mother and said she had crossed a line and that she owed me an apology. Instead, she double-downed, insisting I was manipulative and trying to turn him against her. Kevin hung up on her. Amber had her daughter Lily a week later. She requested I be in the delivery room for emotional support. I obliged. Amber's labor was much easier than the ordeal I'd gone through, but it was intense, and I was happy to be there for her like she'd been there for me. After ensuring Amber and the baby would be okay with Jake, I returned home to rest. Patricia had been calling me all day, but I simply didn't have the energy to deal with her. That same night, Kevin returned from his sister's with the most incredible news. Apparently, Amber told Patricia she couldn't see Lily. Amber told the nurses not to let Patricia in when she showed up unannounced at the hospital. Mark was the only one allowed to see the baby. Amber informed Kevin that, after witnessing Patricia's treatment of me over the years, she made this decision because she did not want that toxic behavior to influence her daughter. Kevin was taken back but supportive of his sister. When he told me I felt this strange combination of validation, so it wasn't just me, and sadness. Can you imagine how terrible she has to be for her daughter to prevent her from seeing her grandchild? On that night, the night we were in bed, Kevin asked me if I thought we should do the same. I said I'd been considering this for some time but had been scared to bring it up. Kevin said he'd had the same thought. We understood we had to face the same decision. We arranged a video call with Amber and Mark ongoing no contact with Patricia. They were completely in support of our decision. Even Mark, who had always sought to keep the peace, said he was fed up with her behavior. He seemed so weary on that call, as if he'd been shouldering this weight for decades. He actually opened up and explained that over the years, he had tried to intervene more directly several times, but it only made Patricia's behavior worse. "I tried to preserve peace in the family," he told us, "but eventually I just got tired of fighting. I'm sorry I didn't do more to protect you both." The following day, Kevin rang Patricia to break the news. She started shouting about how long it had been since he called and how she wanted to see Lucas now. Kevin told her calmly that we wouldn't be in contact from here on out, to protect our family from her toxic behavior, and she was left shocked into silence for a moment. Then she threatened to come over anyway. Kevin told her that if she showed up uninvited, we'd call the police for trespassing. Naturally, she blamed me, that I broke up the family. Kevin got angry at that and said Amber had reached the same decision independently, so clearly the problem wasn't me, it was her. Patricia kept saying that I had poisoned everyone's minds against her. Kevin told her to blame herself for being bitter and, frankly, racist. She made several comments about my Mexican-sounding, name choices, though I'm only 1/4 Mexican and was honoring my grandfather. That finally shut her up. Kevin blocked her number, and so did I. We got security cameras and changed our locks for good measure. I told my family the situation so they wouldn't answer if she came calling. My family was incredibly supportive. My dad even mentioned he'd been wondering when we would draw this line. My mom was sympathetic but agreed it was necessary. My siblings said they'd run interference if Patricia ever came around at family events. Not that she'd ever been to one, she'd always found reasons to skip things with my side. It was a strange few weeks after going no contact. There was this sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Patricia to arrive screaming or send a flying monkey to shame us. But there was also this amazing peace that descended upon our home. I understood how much energy I'd been using worrying about her reactions, planning what to say, recovering from her comments. Without that constant drain, I was more present with Lucas, more connected to Kevin, more me. Prošlo čtyři měsíce puzzle rozdania lakesa, I dva měsíce s tech por, kak my razorvali vse kontakty s Patricii, and he's doing great. He's beginning to smile and coo, and just seeing Kevin with him warms my heart. He's such a wonderful fathered patient, loving, playful. Amber and I meet up for playdates between the babies. They are so cute together. I hope they will be best friends as they grow up. Amber and Jake are getting married next month, which we are all very excited about. We've held steady about no contact with Patricia. She told Mark to talk to us about it, but Mark declined and told her he was sick of her shenanigans as well. A few weeks later, she asked Mark to say she was sorry for everything she'd done. I don't really believe she is genuinely apologetic. This is likely yet another manipulation tool, but we aren't risking it. Mark and our family still visit and bond with Lucas, and that's how it should be. Mark visits once a week for grandpa time with Lucas. It's bittersweet seeing them together. I'm glad Lucas has at least one grandparent on Kevin's side, but sad that Patricia ruined herself this relationship. Mark has felt lighter lately, doing more laughing, staying longer. I keep thinking about how much energy he spent on management of Patricia's moods and meltdowns. The most difficult part of all has been witnessing Kevin try to separate himself from his mother. As toxic as she is still his mother, and there are days I see the hurt in his eyes. He'll spot a mother and son at the park or in a store and get this faraway look. He doesn't say anything, but I know he's grieving the healthy relationship that he never had and never will have. It breaks my heart. We made a family photo album with pictures of all of the big people in Lucas's life, Kevin's dad, my parents, our siblings, a lot of friends. There's a space left open just in case Patricia ever really does change. Kevin says it is unlikely, but I want him to know that my door is not completely closed forever if she ever gets the help she needs. I sometimes think, am I being too hard on some of these guys? She just really cares about her son and grandson in her own jacked-up fashion, right? Then, I remember all of the little comments, the manipulation, the tantrums, and I know we made the right choice. When I married Kevin, I never expected to have to remove his mother from our lives. But being a parent means making difficult choices to try to protect our child, even if those choices hurt. The tranquility in our house these last months has been incredible. No more worrying about her calling or appearing. Say goodbye to dreaded family gatherings. We've gotten a family therapist so that all of us can work through it, especially Kevin. The therapist encouraged us to see that Patricia probably has some form of narcissistic personality disorder, which explains much of her behavior. Kevin has been pushing through his guilt and grief, and I've been learning to be more assertive and to establish boundaries on the early side. The therapist told Kevin to write his mother a letter, not to send, just to get out all of his feelings. He worked on it for a week, and when he finished, he read parts of it to me. As he expressed years of pain, disappointment, and anger, I cried. He wrote about how he's always tried to be the perfect son, wanting her to finally be proud of him, wanting her to approve of him. How he came to understand as an adult that she would never be satisfied. How becoming a father himself opened his eyes to the way a parent should treat a child, and how far she had fallen short. He found it heartbreaking, but also healing. I sometimes remember that first dinner with Kevin's family, how quiet and accommodating I was. I allowed Patricia to trample all over me for years because I wanted her to like me, to be the good daughter-in-law. If I could travel back in time and give my younger self some advice, I would say it is to stand up for yourself is not being mean or disrespectful, it is strong. Someone who really cares about you won't be trying to change you or break you down every second, I'd say to her. I'd tell her that true family carries you, encourages your dreams, honors your choices. It's what my family always did for me, and it's what Kevin and I will do for Lucas. We will teach him that love is not conditional and does not come with demands, that he is deserving of respect just as he is. This is especially for those who may be struggling with a toxic in-law. Do not take years like I did to establish strong boundaries. Communicate with your partner early and often. Ensure that they're willing to put you first, to stand up to their own family if need be. And don't forget, you don't have to put up with abuse from anyone, including your mother-in-law. Our story isn't over yet. Patricia will no doubt try again to wriggle her way into our lives. But I'm no longer the soft-spoken teacher who just let those comments pass. Now that I'm a mother, nothing matters more to me than organizing my son's and my family's peace. If that makes me the villain in Patricia's story, so be it. I certainly am the hero in Lucas's.